I thought it was over until I found this note. I used to think my neighbor was just a quiet, slightly odd old man until the night I realized he had been watching me for weeks without me ever noticing. I moved into a small apartment complex about a year ago, nothing fancy, just one of those places where everyone keeps to themselves and you occasionally hear footsteps through the walls at night, and for the most part it was uneventful until I started noticing small things out of place in my apartment that I couldn't explain at first, like a chair slightly angled differently than I remembered or a cupboard door left just barely open when I was sure I had closed it, and I chalked it up to stress. Or just my own forgetfulness. But then one evening I came home from work and the air in my apartment felt wrong, like someone had been there, not in a dramatic way, just a subtle shift that made my skin crawl, and that's when I noticed the faint smell of cigarette smoke even though I don't smoke and never have, and I stood there in the doorway for a long moment trying to convince myself I was imagining things until I heard a floorboard creak from the hallway leading to my bedroom, and I froze. Completely because I knew I had locked the door when I left that morning, I always do, and the sound was soft but deliberate like someone shifting their weight, so I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, which happened to be a heavy glass bottle, and slowly started walking toward the hallway with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away, and as I got closer the smell of smoke got stronger, and I could hear breathing, slow and controlled, coming from my bedroom. And at that point every instinct was telling me to run but something else pushed me forward, maybe anger or disbelief, and I stepped into the doorway and turned on the light, and there was no one there, just my room exactly as I had left it except for one thing, my window was slightly open, just enough for someone to slip through if they were careful, and I rushed over and looked outside but there was nothing, just the dark courtyard below, and I stood there trying to process what had just happened when I noticed something on my desk that hadn't been there before, a small folded piece of paper, and my hands were shaking as I picked it up and opened it, and inside was a simple message written in shaky handwriting, "You shouldn't leave your windows unlocked," and that's when I felt it, that sensation of being watched, and I turned slowly toward the window and looked out again, scanning the surrounding buildings, and that's when I saw him, standing in the shadows across the courtyard on the second-floor balcony of the opposite building, just barely visible but unmistakably looking directly at me, and he didn't move when our eyes met, he just stood there completely still like he had been waiting for me to notice him, and after what felt like an eternity he slowly raised his hand and gave a small wave before stepping back into the darkness, and I don't remember much of what happened immediately after that except that I called the police and they searched my apartment in the surrounding area but didn't find anyone, and they told me it was probably just someone trying to scare me, maybe a prank. But it didn't feel like a prank, it felt deliberate, calculated, like someone had been studying me, and over the next few days I became hyper-aware of everything, every sound, every movement, constantly checking my locks and keeping my windows shut no matter how warm it got, and I started noticing him more often, that same figure on the balcony across the courtyard, always at different times but always watching, never approaching again but never disappearing either, and I reported it again but there was never enough evidence for anything to be done, and eventually I decided I couldn't stay there anymore, so I packed up my things and moved out as quickly as I could, and for a while I managed to convince myself it was over, that I had left whatever it was behind, until about a month later, when I was unpacking in my new place and found something at the bottom of one of my boxes that I was absolutely certain I had never packed, a small folded piece of paper, and when I opened it my stomach dropped because it was written in the same shaky handwriting and it said, "Moving won't help." Let me know what do you think in the comments.